important.
Let's talk about waste, because people talk about that. What do you do with it? Where do you put it? How dangerous is it?
Right. So let's segue into it like this. Whether it's intentional or not, I do not know. But the fact of the matter is that the anti-nuclear and green groups have created problems in the nuclear industry and then complained about the problems that they created. Okay? For instance, it's extremely expensive. It's too expensive. We need other forms of energy because nuclear is too expensive. Yet they push for the over-regulation that makes it so expensive. Okay? They do the same thing with the waste. They figured out early on that if they could attack the back end of the process and make it impossible to dispose of the waste, that the waste would build up, and then they could talk about how unsafe it was for the waste to build up. So they create their talking points, right, through political process, and they're very effective at it.
And what is the waste?
So your waste is your fission products, right? So plutonium, americium, neptunium, all your actinides is what they're called, right?
Okay.
So now, new technology, advanced fast reactors, solves a lot of that problem. So let's say, for instance, let's start with perspective. So if you lived 80 plus years and every single electron you ever used was from nuclear power, every single mile you drove was from electricity generated by nuclear power in your Tesla, okay, then you would generate 2 pounds of waste that would fit in this can of water.
Me individually?
You individually. 2 pounds in your lifetime. Every man, woman, and child in the United States generates 800 pounds of coal waste a year.
But is there not a difference between coal waste and nuclear waste?
So the radioactive emissions from a coal plant are far more than from a nuclear plant. If a nuclear plant emitted the amount of radionuclides that a coal plant does in their coal ash, the nuclear plant would be shut down immediately.
But we are still talking about, therefore, over the next 30 years, I mean, the population in the US is 300 million people. So
325, 340.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about 325 million cans, sites. That feels like a lot still.
But it's not when you look at the perspective of the other option, right? 800 pounds of coal a year instead of 2 pounds of nuclear waste.
Okay.
Right? So two pounds in a lifetime.
Yeah.
800 pounds a year, right? It's a huge difference in the amount. You talked to someone one day and they had a neat statistic. Like if you took all the waste that had ever been generated worldwide, it would fit on a soccer field about 10 feet deep.
Yes.
Right? It's just simply not that much. So the plan was originally that we were going to store the waste in Yucca Mountain.
Okay.
Out in Nevada. The reason that place was selected was because the government already owned it and they had done weapons testing there, so there was already some contamination and radiation present. Made sense at the time. Then the political lobbying started, both sides, back and forth, back and forth. So we decided in the interim we were going to keep our waste in what we call dry cask storage, which is good for at least 100 years, right? Very safe. But eventually it needs to be moved somewhere more permanent. So my understanding of the problem with Yucca Mountain is that it's very geologically complex. So as far as tectonic, volcanic, water permeability of soil and rock, it's very complex, which doesn't mean that it will not work, but I would have to look at the probabilistic analysis and the math to make that determination, right? And so far, they have not managed to convince the regulators that we can go forward with that. Now, how much of that's politics, I do not know. But they were supposed to have it online in 1998, and the nuclear industry was paying a certain amount of cents per kilowatt generated to a fund that was meant to pay for it. In 1998, it didn't come online, and the nuclear industry made the government pay them back.
Where is the nuclear waste being stored right now?
So wherever the plants are, they have it in dry cask storage at the plants. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they want to ideally move towards a centralized.
Yes. More centralized is better. It's easier to keep track of. The other thing is that deep geological repositories, right? That's really the way to go. That's what most other, Finland and several other countries use, your deep geological repositories. What they basically do, they take the waste, they wrap the waste in copper so it will never corrode. Then they pack it with bentonite clay. Okay, that is what they call sorption, because if anything's released, it automatically adheres to the clay and it won't go any further. And then they bury that some, 500-600 feet, I don't know the exact distance, underground, right? And they do it in an area with no tectonic or volcanic activity and where water doesn't move through the soil, right? So that's one plan, okay? The second plan is, which we have been doing for a long time now, is a place in New Mexico called the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. And that's where all the weapons waste goes from cleanup of weapons sites from back in the 40s and 50s. And it's in a salt bed some 2,000 feet underground that has remained exactly the way it is now for millions and millions of years. Great place to store waste. And they've been doing it very safely there for a long time with zero problems.
And it's not drums of green goo.
No.
Like The Simpsons.
No. That's part of our media hysteria, right?
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think that looking forward in time, there's a place that's in the Pacific Ocean, 32 north, 164 west is what they refer to it as. And it's deep seabed disposal, okay?
That does sound scary.
But it's not. Listen, this is good. There's a place there that has remained exactly the same for over 35 million years. It's a 35 or 38,000, it's almost the size of the state of Tennessee. And it's like a plain with no currents, no marine life. The clay is several hundred feet deep. You can put it in the clay. You've got the same sorption characteristics that you would have having it in the bentonite clay. You can put a tracker on it. You can keep track of it. You don't have to worry about terrorists being able to get to it and nuclear weapon proliferation. It solves a lot of your problems, right?
Have you looked at any of this? I'm sure I saw a thing to do with nuclear waste as a battery. Can you search for nuclear waste batteries, Danny?
Well, what they can do is the water reactors that we have. So whenever they burn fuel, they burn about 2 to 5% of the fuel. So it will be like you taking a log and throwing it in your fireplace and burning the bark off and then throwing the log away, right? They're not using much. Your advanced fast reactors, you can take the fuel once it's depleted about every 18 months. You change the fuel. You can take the fuel out and you can put it in a fast reactor and burn almost 100% of it, and there's almost zero waste left.
And why does a fast reactor do that?
Because it uses fast neutrons instead of thermal neutrons. Remember our discussion about thermal neutrons? It uses fast neutrons. So what it can do is it can turn all those different actinides into burnable fuel and then burn it. And that's a new technology, of course, we didn't have 50 years ago, right? 2 fast reactors can burn all the fuel from 5 power reactors.
Interesting.
Yes.
You find it?
Yeah, there is this. I don't know if like anything's come of it, but
Nano diamond batteries, innovative energy generator and storage that redefines, revolutionizes the batteries. Its long-lasting properties and longevity are ensured by converting the radioactive decay energy from nuclear waste into energy.
So you remember we were talking about the decay heat?
Yeah.
Remember that discussion we had earlier about the reactor? Okay, so that's the same decay energy process, right? And you're still releasing, as you're having beta minus decay and other decays, you're releasing energy.
Interesting.
I've never seen that before, but I can see technologically why it would work.
Can you go back, Danny, and go to images? Go to Google Images, because I can think of a specific image I've seen with regards to this. Yeah. Interesting. So there's a lot of innovation still to happen within this industry as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some amazing things. There are some new reactors that I do not have a good understanding of, but they're gas-cooled reactors, right? And a lot of the fuel is in a different form in those, right? So that's like some new cutting edge technology that I'm not overly familiar with, but that seems to be what's coming out on the cutting edge.
Yeah. So in terms of the issues that we're facing, how do you think we better communicate? Is it things like this that get out to more people?
Yes, absolutely. Right. Imagine if the government took the time and energy that it spent on convincing people COVID vaccines were safe and did that for nuclear power for a year. That would work.
That would definitely work.
Right. And if we're really concerned about rising sea levels, drought, right? If we're really concerned about all of these deforestation, toxic chemicals, if we're really worried about all of these things, Why would we not? If 7 million people are dying a year from pollution, why would we not go do that training? We did it for COVID. Why would we not for nuclear power?
Yeah.
Education and get the politics out. That's the two things that need to happen.